They walk among us, quiet, watchful, magnetic. You will not notice them in crowds, but they drift through your dreams. They are not simply different. They are chosen, marked by an invisible force that bends reality around their psyche. When it comes to sexuality, they do not follow rules, they break them. This is not about fetishes or taboo for its own sake. It is about shadows, repressed traumas, and the seduction of the unconscious self. The chosen ones experience desire as an alchemical fire, a force that destroys, heals, and awakens. Their lust is not simple hunger, but a call from the archetypal anima, whispering from the depths of their soul. In exploring them, we peel back layers most people are terrified to face, revealing unusual sexual behaviors not as perversion but as psychological initiation. Those on the path of deep self-realization display a consistent pattern, a powerful erotic attraction to what is dark, forbidden, or morally ambiguous. These are not fleeting fantasies, but all-consuming fixations that grip the psyche, like fever. To the outside world, they look like dangerous obsessions. But underneath these erotic pulls are expressions of the unconscious, a desperate attempt to reintegrate the shadow self. Carl Jung described the shadow as the unconscious parts of the psyche that the ego refuses to accept qualities we call bad, shameful, primitive, or immoral. Repressing them does not erase them. We project them onto other people, often those we are inexplicably drawn to. For the chosen ones, the erotic becomes a battleground of shadow projection. The lover they cannot resist is rarely just a person, but a symbol of everything they have denied within themselves. Libido in Jungian terms is not merely sexual energy, but psychic life force. When libido encounters repressed material, especially related to sexuality, shame, or trauma, it seeks to process and reintegrate it. One of the strongest ways this happens is through erotic projection. We are not drawn to people only for their looks or charm. We are often magnetically attracted to those who embody traits we have disowned: dominance, chaos, emotional volatility, primality. A person who is deeply good, responsible, and controlled may have a shadow full of rage, impulsiveness, or sensuality. And when someone arrives carrying those energies, the experience feels like love or soul connection, when in fact, it is the unconscious trying to reclaim itself. Many of the most intense, sexually charged relationships are not about compatibility, but about integration. Consider the archetypal good girl who finds herself drawn to a brooding, dangerous man. He is not safe, perhaps not even kind, yet she is enthralled. This is not a failure of judgment, but a psychological initiation. He represents her disowned aggression, her repressed sensuality, her unexplored power. In surrendering to him more, even fantasizing about doing so, she confronts parts of herself she has long suppressed. For men, the dynamic is often reversed. It's a kind and composed nice guy finding himself drawn to a chaotic, emotionally volatile woman who is dangerous to his ego, but impossible to ignore. She is the anima in shadow form, wounding and awakening in equal measure. One of the great obstacles to understanding these attractions is shame, especially erotic shame. Most people are taught to feel guilt about their sexual instincts and are trained to hide or sanitize their desires to fit social norms or religious morals. When eroticism attaches to the shadow, the attraction becomes even more charged because it dances with forbidden. The more we deny the desire, the more power it gains in the unconscious. This is how compulsive patterns develop, returning again and again to toxic partners, abusive dynamics, or sexual situations that leave one feeling hollow. Such people are not just seeking sex, but the reclamation of what they have lost within themselves. Projection is not love. It is a mirror game, where the other person carries the weight of your unlived life. Believing that the other is the source of the magic or erotic fire leads to addiction and loss of self. Pain is mistaken for passion and chaos for connection. Jung called this being possessed by the complex. Until the individual reclaims the projected parts as their own, the cycle continues. The goal is not to eliminate these desires, but to illuminate them. Instead of shaming yourself for being attracted to someone wrong, ask why your unconscious chose them. What do they represent? What feelings do they evoke that you have tried to suppress? What power, sensuality, or rage do they awaken in you? Through honest self-inquiry, journaling, and shadow work, you can withdraw the projection and integrate the shadow energy they represent. The attraction becomes conscious, no longer compulsive or blinding. This is the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the unconscious into conscious awareness. Your sexual instincts, once wrapped in shame and secrecy, become tools of self-knowledge. For the chosen ones, sexuality is rarely just about pleasure. It is about power, healing, and transformation. They are drawn to the dark because the dark is where the light is buried. Their sexual attractions, especially the ones they cannot explain, are guides, not traps. The toxic lover, the forbidden crush, the morally gray seducer, they are all archetypal messengers of what the soul still needs to reclaim. When reclamation happens, the need for chaos dissolves. The attraction no longer burns because the lesson has been learned. The chosen one, no longer seeks salvation in the other, but finds the erotic fire within themselves. For those undergoing psychological and spiritual awakening, sexuality is never merely about physical gratification. It becomes a battlefield of internal conflict, repressed energy, and the sacred drive for transformation. Among the most misunderstood phenomena within this path is semen retention, not as mere discipline, but as inner alchemy. We must first understand the psychic burden of sexual repression and how unresolved. Shame around erotic desire mutates into numbness or neurosis. For many awakened individuals raised in strict or conservative environments, sexual desire is demonized. The libido becomes something to fear, to battle against, to silence. Over time, the result is not purity, but fracture. Sexual repression is not discipline, but fear wrapped in moral justification. Many chosen ones, even while seeking truth and light, have internalized deep erotic shame, the idea that sex is impure or distracting from spiritual pursuits. This repression often originates in early experiences: parental shame, religious indoctrination, punishment for innocent sexual curiosity, or cultural taboos. When libido is suppressed, it does not disappear. It sinks into the unconscious, warping into addiction, emotional numbness, or perverse fantasies. Jung called this psychic splitting. The libido is separated from the ego and returns disguised as anxiety, depression, compulsions, or uncontrolled projections. Awakening requires facing not just the light of higher consciousness, but the dark, burning force of one's own sexual energy. This confrontation is not about denial, but about transmutation. Semen retention is an ancient practice renewed among spiritual seekers who view it as conserving vital energy. In Taoist and yogic traditions, semen is seen as a core life essence. Ejaculation is believed to drain not just physical vitality, but also spiritual potency. For many men on the path of individuation, semen retention becomes a tool not of repression, but of focused psychic refinement. In Jungian terms, when libido is not expelled outward through compulsive gratification, it is sublimated, redirected into higher functions like creativity, spiritual insight, or inner transformation. The key is not suppression, but sublimation. Jung believed that libido is not limited to sexuality, but is the energy of life itself. How this energy is used defines one's path. Constant unconscious sexual release drains the psyche. Contained and rechanneled activates individuation, the integration of the self. This does not mean abstinence, but understanding sex and its urges as symbolic, as representations of something deeper, longing for union. To repress this is to silence your inner voice. To transmute it is to listen more deeply. Yet not all semen retention is healthy. When it stems from fear of women, loathing of the body, or avoidance of intimacy, it becomes another mask of repression. Without proper shadow work, it can lead to emotional numbness, spiritual inflation, and a growing disconnect from the inner feminine. Jung warned of the danger of over-identifying with the archetype of the ascetic, the saint, or the spiritual hero. One can become possessed by the persona of purity, while the shadow becomes more toxic and chaotic in the background. True semen retention in the context of psychological alchemy, is intentional and integrated. It is not about denial but cultivation. Those who walk this path do so with awareness. They practice shadow work, confront repressed desire rather than escape it, maintain emotional intimacy, redirect sexual energy into creative acts, and honor both the sacred and the primal aspects of sexuality. Such individuals report heightened dreams, clearer intuition, sharper mental focus, and a stronger connection to the symbolic realm of the unconscious. This is libido being reclaimed by the self, not wasted on compulsive pleasure, but offered to the fire of individuum. To distinguish discipline from denial. Discipline honors sexual energy as sacred and chooses when and how to engage with it. Responsive, not reactive. Denial stems from fear, a defensive reaction running from erotic shame rather than integrating it. In Jungian language, erotic discipline is ego self-alignment, while denial is ego-shadow disassociation. For many on the path of awakening, intimacy is a paradox. They crave connection, depth, passion. Yet when faced with real emotional closeness, particularly in sexual contexts, they shut down. Numbness creeps in. Pleasure is there, but the soul is not. The body may be engaged, but the heart is far away. This is not a sign of being broken, but a psychic defense mechanism rooted in trauma, shame, and the repression of feeling. The individual may appear sexually active, but their intimacy system is offline. The erotic act becomes mechanical or performative, something done to the other or for the self, but not with the other. Emotional numbness is often misinterpreted as disinterest or detachment, but in truth, it is the soul recoiling from vulnerability. A silent scream for safety masked behind a calm or seductive exterior in Jungian psychology. Highly rational or spiritually aspirational people often repress the feeling function. When intimacy requires emotional risk, the psyche retreats. This can become somatic numb, genitals, disconnection from sensation, lack of orgasm, difficulty maintaining arousal, signs of emotional trauma stored in the body. This freeze response originates almost always in early relational trauma neglect, emotional inconsistency, abandonment, or invasive parenting. The child learns that emotional vulnerability is unsafe. Love becomes conditional. Touch may become manipulative or abusive. Over time, the ego learns a powerful lesson. If I want to survive, I must not feel too much. This lesson carries into adulthood, where emotional intimacy, especially in sexual settings, activates buried wounds. Even in consensual, loving encounters, the unconscious may interpret vulnerability as danger. The libido short-circuits. Pleasure fades. The person checks out mentally, emotionally, and sometimes physically. This is not disinterest, but self-protection masquerading as detachment. One of the most powerful psychological blocks to emotional connection during sex is shame. When the erotic self is judged or punished in early life, it becomes hidden in the shadow. For the chosen ones, who often hold themselves to high spiritual or moral standards, erotic shame is especially potent. Even when they want connection, their psyche may punish them for desiring it. The unconscious belief goes, if I fully surrender to this moment, I will be exposed, judged, or abandoned. So instead of opening up, they shut down. Sexual activity may continue outwardly, but internally the person is gone. This psychic split between body and heart is a message from the soul. There is something here that has not yet been felt. Emotional numbness is symbolic. It indicates that the libido has become trapped in the unconscious, locked behind protection and dissociation. Love and passion are not absent, but buried. To overcome this, the chosen one must do the dangerous thing. Feel what has been avoided. Reconnect with the body. Sit with discomfort. Allow tears. Admit fear. Breathe into shame rather than run from it. This process is how the ego learns to trust again, how the inner feminine is restored, and how emotional numbness transforms into emotional presence. Jung spoke of archetypes that govern our unconscious. In sexuality and intimacy, the wounded lover is one of the most powerful. This archetype appears as the seducer who cannot love, the caretaker who cannot receive, the sexual partner who cannot feel. They are magnetic and broken. This archetype lives in many chosen ones because the wounded lover is often the initiation gatekeeper to individuation. Before one can truly love another, one must integrate the pain of not having been loved as a child. Before one can merge with another soul, one must reconnect with their own. The wounded lover avoids intimacy because it reminds them of what they lacked. Their journey is not to reject love, but to learn how to trust it again. To begin thawing emotional numbness, especially in sexual settings, chosen ones must approach themselves with radical gentleness. This is not a battle to win, but a heart to soothe. Practices include gentle exploration of the body without expectation, inner dialogue with the anima, slowing down intimacy, trauma-releasing exercises, journaling fears and fantasies, and honest communication with partners. The path to awakening is not a straight ascent into light, but a descent into the body and into the frozen places where love once tried to bloom and was denied. Emotional numbness is not a curse, but a signpost saying, there is more of you waiting to be known. When this frozen energy begins to melt, sex is no longer performance but prayer. Intimacy is no longer terrifying but becomes the safest place on earth. The heart opens in gentle, continuous unfolding. This is not just healing but alchemy. The erotic is not only what arouses us, but what awakens us. Sexual fantasy may seem like private entertainment, but for the chosen ones it becomes a symbolic language of the unconscious. Our dreams, obsessions, compulsions, and fantasies express the parts of ourselves we have forgotten, denied, or disowned. Fantasy is not just indulgence, but therapy. The chosen ones often have vivid, unusual, or disturbing fantasies that are not mistakes, but invitations to explore the soul's forgotten corridors. The shadow represents all the qualities we reject or repress in our self's rage. Lust, selfishness, wildness, neediness, dominance, submission. When these energies are not integrated, they appear in fantasy. Fantasies of domination, public exposure, taboo encounters, or extreme vulnerability do not mean someone is broken. They symbolize repressed parts that need acknowledgement. Jung considered the erotic a sacred force, a drive toward union, wholeness, and transformation. Erotic images and fantasies often contain archetypal significance, the union of opposites, the descent into the unconscious, the confrontation with power and shame. Dismissing these fantasies as just fantasy misses their purpose. They are tools for individuation. Many sexual fantasies contain recurring archetypes: the seducer, the dominant, the submissive. The stranger, all symbolic roles representing parts of our psyche trying to speak. Explored consciously, they become therapeutic. One of the biggest barriers to interpreting sexual fantasy is shame, the inherited voice saying, "This is wrong or sick." The chosen ones must face this shame, not to indulge fantasy blindly, but to learn from it. Behind every shameful desire is a story of repression. When shame is removed, what is left is meaning. A woman who fantasizes about being tied up may discover she was taught to never ask for anything, punished for being too much, and always had to be strong and in control. Her fantasy becomes a symbolic request to surrender, to be cared for without responsibility, to feel helpless safely. Fantasy in this case is not damage, but a key to healing. Many people attempt to act out their fantasies. Sometimes this is healing, sometimes re-traumatizing. The difference is consciousness. The chosen ones are called not simply to perform their fantasies, but to understand and integrate them. Ask what emotion the fantasy allows you to feel that you cannot in real life. What part of you comes alive in it that is suppressed elsewhere? What it symbolizes in your psychological or spiritual journey. When examined this way, fantasy becomes a mirror, a ritual, an initiation, transforming raw libido into refined awareness. Fantasy can also become a trap when used to avoid real intimacy. NUMB, pain, or disconnect from the body, as seen in compulsive pornography use. The difference between fantasy as therapy and fantasy as escape is presence. When engaged consciously, fantasy helps you grow. When used compulsively, it keeps you stuck. Your most shameful fantasies may be keys to your freedom, not because you should live them out literally, but because they hold metaphors for what your soul needs. A desire for submission may point to exhaustion from control. A fantasy of domination may reveal repressed rage or unacknowledged power. A taboo desire may confront cultural boundaries that suffocate your truth. Stop judging the fantasy and start listening to it. In Jungian psychology, the anima is the inner feminine aspect of the male psyche-motion. Intuition, creativity, vulnerability, sensuality, soul. She is not a woman, but a symbolic figure shaped by earliest experiences with women and cultural ideas of femininity. The women, a man is drawn too obsessively, erotically, sometimes destructively, often external embodiments of his internal anima. Romantic attraction is not just personal but mythic. These women are mirrors of the soul's missing half. When the anima is unconscious, she tends to project onto real women. The man believes he has met his soulmate, his goddess, his salvation, but in reality, he is falling in love with the image of his anima, not the woman herself. This explains why certain attractions feel otherworldly. She reflects the qualities he has not yet integrated: emotional depth, spontaneity, sensuality, chaos, creative madness, intuitive knowing. She becomes the symbol of the self he is still trying to reclaim. When the anima is projected, relationships become intense, romanticized, and destabilizing. The woman is idealized as perfect, magical, or transformative. The more she becomes idealized, the less she can be related to authentically. The chosen one feels deep love, but also fear of losing her. Fear of rejection. Fear the relationship is not meant to be unless perfect. This triggers unconscious control, neediness, or withdrawal. This is not mature love, but eros in service of projection. Until he withdraws the projection and recognizes these qualities within himself, the relationship becomes unstable or codependent.